The image of 17-year-old Lisa Holm is one of absolute unblemished innocence. She represents the archetype of bright potential, a young woman standing on the precipice of adulthood, full of dreams, warmth, and a kindness that touched everyone she met. But on a quiet, unassuming summer's evening, in the picturesque village of Blomberg, Sweden, that light was extinguished. She vanished from the cafe where she worked, leaving behind only a deafening silence and a mystery that would shatter the nation's sense of security. What followed was not just a search, it was a mobilization of humanity. It became one of the most extensive, desperate, and emotionally charged search operations in Swedish history. Hundreds of volunteers, fleets of military and police helicopters, and officers from districts far and wide flooded the countryside. They secured every acre of farmland, scoured every dense forest, and checked every abandoned structure, all driven by the singular, agonizing hope of finding her alive. However, as the agonizing hours stretched into days, the atmosphere shifted. Ominous clues began to surface from the landscape, like pieces of a nightmare, slowly assembling themselves. The initial worry among officers deepened into a heavy, suffocating dread. Tragically, after 5 days of relentless searching, they found their answer. Hidden deep inside a nearby farm, investigators discovered a location that would come to be known infamously as the milking room. It was a crime scene so disturbing, so fundamentally grotesque in its nature, that many of the hardened officers who stepped inside required professional therapy just to process the horror they had witnessed. It was a place where innocence collided with absolute depravity. So, what exactly happened to Lisa Holm during those lost hours? What precisely is the milking room? And who is the monster responsible for such revolting behavior? Because there truly is no other word to describe the killer. He was absolutely revolting. A predator hiding behind a mask of normalcy. The further we delve into the timeline, the forensics, and the psychological profile of this case, the more we realize that Lisa's final moments must have been nothing short of soul-destroying. Welcome back to Beyond the Crime. Today, we uncover the darkness behind one of Sweden's most terrifying investigations. We are a small, independent team committed to real storytelling. So if you value deep dive coverage, please consider subscribing. It truly helps us continue our work. Now, we must walk the path Lisa walked. Steel yourselves as we investigate the case of Lisa Holm. To understand the gravity of the events that we're about to unfold, we must first immerse ourselves in the setting. Geography often plays a critical role in crime, and in this case, the isolation of the location is a key character in the story. It was a gentle Sunday evening in June of 2015, and the small Swedish village of Blomberg was busy simply being its usual self. It was a state of existence defined by charm, quietude, and picturesque beauty. Blomberg is the kind of place where life moves slowly, a community anchored in the belief that nothing bad ever happens. The residents operate under a social contract of trust. Doors are left unlocked, neighbors are considered family. Frankly, the area does not possess the population to support the kind of darkness usually reserved for gritty urban centers. You have to picture the landscape to truly grasp the isolation Lisa faced. Think of gentle rolling hills that stretch to the horizon, vast expanses of flat farmland broken only by clusters of dense, ancient trees, and the occasional weathered farmhouse. It is all enclaved within a distinctly Nordic setting. Beautiful during the day, but profound in its solitude as the sun begins to set. Sweden as a whole often ranks near the very top of the list for the most livable nations on Earth. It creates a false sense of security, a feeling that safety is not just a privilege, but a guarantee. But as we know, predators exist in all environments, and sometimes the safest places offer the best cover. Now let us return to the timeline of the investigation. It was June 7th, 2015. 17-year-old Lisa Holm was finishing her shift at a local countryside cafe situated near the foot of Kinnicol, a beautiful geological formation framed by two vast lakes. It was a scenic spot, popular with tourists and locals alike. Lisa was known by everyone around her to be bright, dependable, and mature far beyond her years. In fact, both of her parents trusted her completely. They felt entirely comfortable allowing her to work at the cafe and, crucially, to commute home alone. She had started her job at this location only a few weeks prior. Although her parents had driven her back and forth each week as she worked her weekend shifts, today marked a significant milestone in her young life. This was the day she would finally drive home alone on her new moped. It was a rite of passage, a small step toward independence. It was approximately 6:23 p.m. The sun was beginning its slow descent over the hills, casting long shadows across the cafe parking lot. Lisa paused to send a text message to her father. The message was routine, mundane even. She stated that she was finished locking up the cafe and would be on her way home shortly. Now, let's analyze this journey. The drive would usually take around half an hour. It was a route she had traveled countless times before as a passenger. Although most of those trips were with her parents, she knew the way back home perfectly. The road wound through dense forests and open farmlands. Generally, it was considered to be extremely safe. It was peaceful here, the kind of silence where one assumes no threat exists. However, that evening, the atmosphere shifted. Somewhere in that silence, eyes were watching. Lisa would never make it back home. As the minutes turned into hours, the initial concern of a parent waiting for a child gave way to a heavy, sinking dread. By 8 p.m., the silence from Lisa was deafening. Her father could no longer wait. Driven by an instinct he likely couldn't explain, he jumped into his car and drove fast towards the cafe, scanning the empty, darkening roads for any sign of his daughter or her moped. When he finally arrived at the scene, he initially felt a wave of relief. He saw her moped. It was still there, parked neatly by the cafe. But that relief shattered only moments later as he approached the bike. A closer inspection revealed a chilling detail that immediately signaled foul play. The keys were still hanging loosely from the ignition. This was not the behavior of a girl who had simply gone for a walk or caught a ride with a friend. She had been interrupted. As for her bag, it was sitting right next to the bike itself, abandoned. To make the situation even more worrying, not only was her helmet missing, but the cafe she had just closed was dark, silent, and completely empty. Lisa's father called out her name into the twilight. He shouted into the surrounding woods, hoping for a response, hoping for a logical explanation. But despite his desperate efforts, there was no answer. Only the sound of the wind and the creaking of old trees could be heard. Lisa Holm was gone, driven by a father's worst nightmare. Panicked and desperate, Lisa's father made the call to the police at 9:47 p.m. Within hours, the quiet countryside was besieged by urgency. A massive search operation was immediately underway. This wasn't just law enforcement. The community mobilized. Neighbors, friends, and local volunteers all flocked to the area, united by a single terrifying goal: to find her before it was too late. Beams of flashlights cut through the darkness, sweeping far and wide across the open fields. Every structure in the nearby area was thoroughly checked. But despite the incredible turnout and the sheer volume of manpower, the first sweep of the area revealed almost nothing at all. There were no obvious signs of a struggle, no overturned gravel, no blood, no footprints leading away into the night. There was absolutely nothing, and that is when they found their first subtle clue. It was a discovery that would shift the focus of the entire investigation. Inside of an old barn, which was located directly next to the cafe and just across the road, police dogs caught wind of a specific scent, Lisa's scent. Now let's talk about this barn. It was essentially abandoned. Nobody worked there. It was a structure primarily used to store random pieces of furniture, but otherwise, it was just derelict. Moving into the barn, police realized that the interior was cluttered and chaotic. But there, in the dirt, they found something important. Lying on the ground was a single black glove. It was an item that seemed out of place among the old debris, and it was later confirmed to belong to Lisa. This glove changed everything. It meant she hadn't just left the cafe, she had been taken or forced into this structure. As midnight came and went, the situation escalated rapidly. In the space of only a few hours, the search party had grown into one of the largest operations that the region had ever seen. More police officers arrived from surrounding districts. The locals, fueled by adrenaline and worry, refused to sleep. Even people who barely knew Lisa or who had never met her at all joined in on the search, because things like this simply did not happen in Blomberg. By dawn, this quiet, sleepy village had quite literally transformed into a hub of crisis. Makeshift command posts were set up. Maps were taped to tables and covered in notes and grid lines. And as the sun rose over the fields of Blomberg, one thing was becoming undeniably clear. The fear and uncertainty that had gripped the village overnight was only going to get worse. By June 10th, an organization known as Missing People joined a search party. They brought in dozens of disciplined team members and specialized equipment to aid the effort. 2 days later, the first real clues began to surface, and they painted a disturbing path. Along a dirt road, only a kilometer away from the cafe, searchers found scattered belongings. A pink phone case and parts of a mobile phone were discovered in the dirt. Eventually, these items were confirmed to belong to Lisa. The police increased the search area to a diameter of 10 kilometers, and as they did, more findings came to light. Soon after the discovery of the phone, and further along that same dirt road, they found a torn receipt and a train ticket with Lisa's name clearly printed on it. It was a trail of breadcrumbs leading away from the cafe. Unfortunately, the discoveries did not stop there. A friend of Lisa's father was driving past the cafe when he realized that the barn next door, the very same barn located directly across the road from the cafe where the glove had been found, no longer had any police tape surrounding it. With the barn no longer off limits, the neighbor decided to take a look inside himself. While standing there, amidst the dust and debris, he spotted a pair of pearl earrings glinting on the floor. He immediately recognized them. He knew they belonged to Lisa. It's safe to say that the evidence left behind was chaotic and scattered across the landscape. This scattering wasn't accidental. It looked deliberate. It was almost as if someone had tried to confuse the trail, creating noise to send the search parties in the wrong direction. By June 11th, 4 agonizing days after Lisa's disappearance, the search zone had widened yet again, expanding its perimeter to encompass all of the nearby farms and estates. One of the properties falling within this new radius was Martorp Farm, located approximately a mile away from the cafe. It was a location modest in size, showing clear signs of aging and weathering. At the time, This farm served as the home for 3 migrants from the Baltics. It is interesting to note that despite having moved to the country multiple years prior, none of the residents could actually speak Swedish. They communicated exclusively in Lithuanian and English. Aside from the language barrier, there initially appeared to be nothing remarkable about these individuals. However, that perception changed drastically on June 12th. This is where behavioral analysis becomes crucial. As volunteers began to sweep around the perimeter of the farm, something strange happened. 2 of the residents, a man and a woman, emerged from the property and approached the search party. But this was not a greeting. Instead, they aggressively insisted that police officers had already swept and searched the area. They told the volunteers, with striking urgency, that they should not waste their time looking there. This urgency felt immediately wrong. In criminal profiling, we often look for deflection. This was textbook deflection. The volunteers noted that the man, in particular, appeared incredibly tense, exhibiting signs of high anxiety. In fact, his agitation was so severe that he threatened the volunteers, stating that if they did not move on immediately, he would contact the police to have them removed. Now, thankfully, the search party stood their ground. They refused to back down in the face of this intimidation. They could not articulate exactly why at that moment, but there was something about this place, and specifically about the behavior of these residents, that felt deeply uneasy. It is a bitter irony that if his goal was to draw attention away from the property, the anxious man actually achieved the exact opposite. His aggressive behavior unsettled the volunteers so deeply that they did the one thing he feared most. They called the police. Within minutes, officers arrived on the scene. They arrived prepared to search every single inch of Martorp Farm. While officers were traveling towards the farm, they realized a chilling pattern regarding the evidence found thus far. Most of Lisa's items, her phone, the case, the receipt, had been discovered along a path that led directly to this property. The vector was clear. She was heading this way. As daylight began to fade, police officers methodically spread out across the grounds. And sadly, it was there, hidden in a tall grass just outside of one of the sheds, that searchers finally made a breakthrough. Concealed among the weeds and branches was a dark jacket, which would later be confirmed to belong to Lisa. Directly underneath it, they found her white moped helmet. With this discovery, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The search was over. The crime scene investigation began. Police sealed off the area immediately. Detectives noticed that one of the small white sheds, located towards the back of the property, had long grass leading up to its door. Crucially, this grass had been trampled flat. This was odd, because the shed itself looked like a building that was never in use. Yet the fresh tracks in the grass suggested recent, heavy activity. In response to this anomaly, they pried the door open. The moment they stepped inside, the officers were hit with a wall of foul air. It was the horrible, heavy smell of death, an unmistakable scent that every seasoned officer recognizes instantly. The shed itself consisted of 2 small rooms, a makeshift bedroom and a locker room. The smell seemed to be emanating from one of those lockers. One by one, they opened the metal doors. Tragically, they eventually found what they had been looking for all this time. Crammed within the narrow confines of that cabinet was Lisa's lifeless body. It appeared that she had been partially undressed. Her mouth was sealed shut with thick gray tape, and around her neck, officers spotted a knotted rope. Of course, this discovery was devastating. After nearly a week of tireless, desperate searching, it had all come to an end with the worst outcome imaginable. With the discovery of the body, the investigation shifted to a manhunt. Suspicion coalesced rapidly around the man who had aggressively attempted to wave off the volunteers. His name was Neregis Bilavicius, a 35-year-old migrant from Lithuania. The very next morning, police moved in. All 3 residents were arrested and taken into custody for questioning. At first glance, Neregis was the definition of forgettable. He was presented as a quiet, broad-shouldered farmhand who kept mostly to himself. But when police executed a search warrant on his living quarters, they uncovered the digital footprint of a monster. His computer was packed with violent pornography, and his browser history painted a disturbing picture of deep-seated obsession, control, and sexual aggression. When it came to physically linking him to Lisa's murder, Neregis actually made the job of the investigators incredibly easy. He left his biological signature everywhere. He left DNA from both exits of his body at the crime scene. Furthermore, Lisa's clothing contained trace amounts of Neregis's DNA as well. Neregis's neighbors also shared damning details. Some had seen his car parked near the cafe on the evening of her disappearance. And he was not simply driving by. Witnesses described the vehicle as idling. He was watching. A surveillance camera at a local gas station captured him later that same evening. Psychologically speaking, Neregis fit the terrifying archetype of the monster hiding in plain sight. He was supposedly a family man, a husband, and a father. But internally, he was a predator who was simply waiting for the right opportunity to strike. To fully understand the nightmare Lisa endured, we must walk through the crime scenes. In one of the barns on Martorp Farm, detectives found a specific room that had previously been used for storing cow's milk. It was a desolate chamber covered in thick layers of dust and grime. The entire atmosphere of the place was revolting. But while investigators were documenting this squalor, they noticed a chilling inconsistency. Amidst the filth, one of the overhead pipes looked ominously clean, free from the dust and debris that coated everything else. Upon taking a closer look, they realized that both the pipe and the floor directly beneath it contained microscopic rope fragments. When analyzed, the results were definitive. The rope found around Lisa's neck was the exact same type found in this room. Detectives dubbed this the milking room. With this forensic link established, detectives were able to confirm that Lisa had tragically been strangled right there, within the cold, dirty confines of the milking room. Investigators also discovered semen in this room and on Lisa's clothing. When this biological material was compared to Neregis's DNA profile, they found a conclusive match. To add insult to injury, his defense was absurd. Neregis claimed that he had simply relieved himself in the barn on a totally separate occasion. But his genetic fingerprints were everywhere, on the rope, on her clothes, on the inside and outside of her garments, and scattered around the barn. Forensics would even find his blood on Lisa's jacket, a detail which suggested that a violent struggle had taken place. And then, the evidence becomes even more grotesque. Found just outside the door of the milking room was a significant pile of human feces. Analysis confirmed it belonged to Neregis. This led officers to a nauseating theory that immediately after murdering Lisa, Neregis was so overwhelmed by the excitement or adrenaline that he literally lost control of his bowels. It stands as one of the most shameful, primal moments recorded in criminal history. The depravity did not end there. Officers realized that Neregis had a routine. He would break into the old barn across from the cafe. Inside a small room in that barn, they found a clear line of sight straight towards the cafe, a sniper's nest for a voyeur. When they swept the walls with a blacklight, they found multiple biological stains containing Neregis's DNA. He had been using that vantage point to watch Lisa and other women. gratifying himself in secret while he hunted them with his eyes. Based on the prosecution's reconstruction, the timeline of the murder is harrowing. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa locked up the cafe. Her colleagues went to the front to catch a bus, while Lisa went to the back to her moped. This separation left her vulnerable. Evidence suggests Nerijus, who had been lingering nearby, approached her. He likely used a ruse, asking for directions or help with his GPS, a tactic he had attempted with another woman weeks prior. Once she was within reach, he incapacitated her, abducted her, and forced her to the milking room at Martorp Farm. Inside, a violent struggle ensued. Lisa fought desperately, leaving traces of his DNA under her fingernails. Tragically, Neregis overpowered her. He restrained her, gagged her, and strangled her. In the immediate aftermath, he panicked, defecated, and then hid her body in the locker before scattering her belongings along the road to divert suspicion. When pressed for an alibi, Neregis claimed he was sleeping or talking to his mother. Phone records prove this was a lie. Despite the mountain of evidence, including DNA, witness statements, and his own erratic behavior, he denied everything. His trial began in the autumn of 2015. His defense was an exercise in desperation, claiming he was framed, even pointing fingers at his own wife and brother, both of whom had been cleared. His brother even testified that Neregis begged him to fabricate an alibi. On November 17, 2015, the jury found Neregis Bilevicius guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, but the story took a frustrating turn. In early 2017, Neregis applied to be transferred to a prison in his home country of Lithuania. Once transferred, he successfully applied to have his sentence reduced under Lithuanian law, slashing his life sentence to just 15 years. Thankfully, justice intervened. His sentence was eventually reinstated to life imprisonment following an appeal. But prison justice arrived faster than the courts. Nerijus became a target within the Lithuanian prison population. After months of sustained abuse, he was stabbed to death in his cell by another inmate. It was a brutal, violent end for a man who had inflicted so much pain. To be brutally honest, the violent end of Nerijus Bilevicius elicits very little sympathy. He met a fate that mirrored the violence he inflicted. However, my heart still aches for Lisa Holm. Her murder was a national tragedy that sent shockwaves far beyond Blomberg. In the village, life has never quite returned to normal. Parents are more cautious. The cafe became a place of sorrow. But from tragedy came solidarity. The search for Lisa inspired thousands to volunteer for the Missing People organization. Lisa's funeral was far too large for her church to accommodate. Friends described her as kind, creative, and full of dreams, a girl who loved horses and baking and hoped to study architecture in Australia. In her honor, a cherry blossom tree was planted near the cafe. Every spring, its bloom serves as a poignant reminder of the light that was extinguished there. It is a narrative filled with the darkest of details. As we close this case file, I want to know your thoughts. What do you think about the security of rural areas we often take for granted? And what is your perspective on the ultimate, violent justice Neregis found in prison? As always, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me here on Beyond the Crime. Stay safe and stay curious. Thank you and goodbye.